Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon.
Well, I'm inviting you to listen to some shop talk. Two completely devoted teachers, not to each other per se, but to teaching, and particularly teaching organization behavior, which is so elaborately complex and so accessible to everyone. In fact, right now, this is organization behavior as I'm preparing this experience in the podcast episode with Gary Stark, that you can understand why the two of us are kind of nutty about teaching, and particularly this. Now, Gary's not really nutty. He's a very sensible professor of management at Northern Michigan State University. I tease Gary for being up there in the Upper Peninsula, but actually it's on the same latitude as where we raised our kids in Western Maine. Also out there and up there, but wow, some wonderful people and some great learning went on in my tiny campus of the University of Maine. Back to Gary. He's been a natural leader of the Management and Organization Behavior Teaching Society. He was on the board for a number of years and also served as the role OB1, like an OB Kenobi. Person who brought the spark to our conferences, and probably his name should be Gary Spark. I'm sure I'm not the first one who thought of that. But you're going to enjoy the two of us talking shop, I hope, about teaching. Professor Gary Stark. Folks, just before I turned on the recording, I was teasing Gary Stark that I'd been chasing him for about 5 months. And yeah, in a way, because, he was very busy in his world of being a professor of management at Northern Michigan University. Yes, there is a university campus up there. I don't care what anyone has told you. There is one in the Upper Peninsula. Yep. Is that true, Gary?
It's true. There's our arch rival is about 90 miles away. Michigan Tech is also up here, and Lake Superior State is about 2 or 3 hours east of us.
Yeah, I went to school in my graduate school in Michigan, and we had in this consortium program, we had, I think, at least one Mott fellow who was attending the Northern Michigan campus. Nice. Because that was, each of us were doled out. I was at Central, and
oh, sure.
Anyway, we would tease because they would introduce us all by the schools we were affiliated with, and then we'd say, "Oh, and then there's Bob. We think he's going to the Northern Michigan campus, but we're not really sure."
We're not sure if the Upper Peninsula exists.
Yeah, there is one.
You probably know that it's left off a lot of maps. There's a subreddit called something called Left Off of Maps, and there's a lot of you'll see it all the time. I've seen national advertisements leave the UP off the national map. So
how did you get there? Because you're not a Michigander by birth.
I kind of am, actually. I have a T-shirt that says I wasn't born in the Upper Peninsula, but I got here as soon as possible, and that's actually fairly true. I was born in Kansas, and then when I was 1 year old, my dad took a job at Michigan Tech, which is now the arch rival of my current university.
There you go.
I was there for 3 years. He went and got his PhD, moved around a bunch, and then about 18 years ago, I found this job in the Upper Peninsula. So we've always had a connection to it. After my wife and I got married, our first vacation after our honeymoon was to the Upper Peninsula. So it's always been attractive to me. So I feel really, really, really lucky to be here.
It's beautiful country. After I finished my PhD, we had some family issues, so I took a job in Western Maine, leaving University of Connecticut, leaving Petervale, who got me through, and they all said, "Well, there goes David. We'll never see him again." But as it turned out, we're on the same latitude as your campus.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It was delightful, and our kids were little, and they got pretty much through their high school, all the way through small town life.
Yeah.
I never hunted, and I don't think I fished. Didn't matter. I mean, I provided diversity to the county because they referred to me as, you're the guy who doesn't hunt. Yeah, that's me.
Okay. It's not quite that
you know how it is. But actually it gave me, and I think this is sort of segue to your work.
Yeah.
It gave me much closer proximity. That's doubling up on being close, to everyone. And so classes were small when I did some teaching. When I was actually called Dean of Public Service, but I taught OB, and it meant the service work we did and the outreach into the counties where there are terrific statistics that had to be corrected in health and wellness and energy loss, and you name it, in the 70s. We're close, and that was sort of my way of knowing how valuable it is to not only read and understand organization behavior, leadership, management, innovation, all those things that thereto pertaining, but to be a person who can put it into action as a dean, as a friend, as a community volunteer. I saw believing in people. I saw closing learning gaps, work, and a county which, again, like the UP, would have otherwise forgotten, started to get some news about, hey, look what they're doing out there, and I love that. But this isn't all about me. When did you choose the field of management and organization behavior, Gary? Because your dad was a tech guy.
Yeah. Do you want the long story, the short story, the medium length story? I'll try to give you a medium length story. So,
okay.
Going into college, I thought I was going to be an engineer, but I don't know about everybody else's high school, but if you were good at math and science, you were destined to be an engineer. I took a physics class my senior year of high school, hated it, found it incredibly boring. So I realized I'm not going to be an engineer. I didn't know what the hell I was going to be after that. And I just kind of, my wife thinks it's funny. I'm one of the few people for whom accounting was the path of least resistance. I didn't know what to do, but my dad was an accounting professor, but I know all the professors. I know that in accounting, you can get mediocre grades and still get a prestigious job. And sure enough, I got mediocre grades. I went to work for what was then a big 8 accounting firm in Chicago, Arthur Young. I think now they're the big 4, big 3. Hated it, complained about it all the time. My dad was visiting Chicago over his spring break. And I remember it's one of those moments that's just frozen. The frame is frozen in your head, where we lived on the north side, and we were taking the bus back to my apartment. And I was just complaining about my job, as I always did. And either he got sick of hearing me bitch about it, or he just felt so sorry for me. He said, and I remember this, he said, "Did you ever think about being a professor?" And you would think at that point, I don't know, it's probably 24 years old. After 24 years of living with the professor, I would have thought about it. I had never really thought about it.
No.
And I remember him talking about how much he enjoyed being a teacher. And at that time, it was like, I couldn't even imagine enjoying my job. It was just so terrible. And it was his spring break, and he was wouldn't say he was itching to get back, but kind of eager to get back to the classroom. I thought, well, he's doing something right. And again, accounting, I just did because I guess my thinking was more instrumental at the time. But
sure.
I always enjoyed psychology related things. So sort of fell into org behavior, and I absolutely love it.
Did you go to Kansas State or UK?
Kansas State. Yeah. For undergrad and master's degree, and then my PhD is from Nebraska, which is that campuses are about 2.5 miles, 2.5 hours apart, Nebraska and Kansas State.
Yeah. Once you were into the advanced study of organization behavior, did you see some connection between your left and right brains in regard to your operational orientation when you thought you'd want to be an engineer and when you were in accounting, and also what we still call the soft side of business, which bugs me, but that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Did you have to become a whole new Gary Stark in order to teach OP?
Yeah. And even I remember my first semester first semester in the PhD program, still retaining some of those mechanical thoughts. And I remember it was just like 2 weeks or 3 weeks into the PhD program. And I remember one of my professors, Dr. Doug May, who is now at the University of Kansas, which is his alma mater. That I remember telling me, yeah, we're going to disabuse you of all those notions. And at first I was like, wait, is this like some, are you going to, I don't know, you're going to change my brain.
How about a brainwashing?
Or something?
Yeah, exactly.
And
you will not have any pupils when you finish this degree.
Exactly. So, but he was right. It's a different way of thinking. So, struggled for a very short while, and then just started really enjoying it. I can honestly say, and I don't think most people can say this, I enjoyed my PhD program. I enjoyed my classes. I actually enjoyed writing my dissertation. I had a fantastic advisor, Steve Summer. And I don't think anybody enjoys comps. I hated comps, but other than that, I really, really enjoyed it.
Did you do any teaching as a teaching assistant? Were you a TA?
I did. It's a long story behind it, and I won't tell it unless you want to drag it out of me. It's not that interesting. But
now you got my listeners leaning into their speaker. What's the truth of being a TA?
I taught operations management.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Almost exclusively what I taught. I think one semester I got to teach HR. One semester I got to teach org behavior, but I spent 4 years there, and every semester I was teaching operations management.
Yeah, which
actually turned out to be beneficial because when I saw this job here at Northern, so you will recognize this. I'm not sure all of your listeners, viewers will recognize this, but to find somebody who's good at teaching org behavior and operations management, it's a bit of a unicorn, I guess.
It is. That's it definitely.
Yeah, Northern's exactly where I wanted to be.
And they needed that spectrum because they couldn't build up a department of 50 people, Exactly. They basically, and I, in a small public university, we were always trying to find people who could, chew gum and walk at the same time. And yet, but be in that spectrum. And let me make a quick pitch about something Peter Vail said a lot and wrote about these other areas in the business school. They're all OB. Accounting is organizational behavior. Operations is deeply into organization behavior. How so? Unless they're going into the AI realm, which Peter didn't probably know much about, they'd require human thought and effort and collaboration and all the aspects of what humans bring to the work. And yet in business schools, it was, because we like to slice and dice subject matter, make it nice and tidy. You somewhat got that feeling that if you were, as I said earlier, OB, you were the soft side, and they used to tease because, we saw it at the org behavior teaching conferences. Oh, you're the guys with the toys. You're the guys with you're the guys with, with the straws and the eggs and, and the answer was, yeah, exactly, the marshmallow. And the answer was yes. And we therefore had an opportunity to say why, because, learning in action is what we're about. And we would create actions with unsure outcomes. And voila, there's management right there for you.
Right. Yeah. And I tell my students right away, and I have a story behind this. I call it the Jolene story, just a very unusual experience I had at a Burger King in Minnesota once. Just very strange behavior from the cashier. But the point of that story, I asked the students why she behaved this way. And I asked them at first to list 72 reasons why Jolene behaved this way. And they gave me that look you just gave. And they say, 72. I said, what, does that seem like too much? Yeah. And so I said, well, just list 3. And then we go through them. And then I asked them, just sort of rapid fire, okay, why did you do that? Okay, they'll give me an answer. So pretty soon we've amassed a list of 200 or 300 reasons why Jolene behaves the way she did. And then I asked about rockets. How many things do you have to think about to make a rocket reach the moon? It's a finite number of things. It may be a lot, like 800 or so, but it's still finite. With human behavior, it's infinite. So the point is that human behavior is far more complex than rocket science.
I love it.
And when they ever complain, I just say, hey, it's not rocket science. But meaning the opposite of what most people mean when they say that.
You see, I've known you and I've known about you for years, particularly through our Organization Behavior Teaching Society, and in fact attended a session with you last month with you and Steve, and it strikes me that what you do that makes it very special for students is that you create it somewhat on the spur of the moment, in some instances, an exercise just like that.
Yeah.
Where you say, I want 72 reasons why this cashier was grumpy. And then nicely merging it into the hard science and saying, the finite versus the infinite. Yeah. Now that in itself, Gary, is freaking brilliant. And I suspect that, no, honestly, I'm not patronizing. I believe it because that's sort of the gift of why some of us were particularly well recognized in our careers as teaching, because it was sometimes we write those up, and put them in our journal, which is very much which is a very good thing. But what also happened was that the word got out. Sometimes our students would say, "Hey, who's that guy at Northern Michigan?" And immediately they'll say, "Oh, the Burger King guy." They tag it, and it brings back a lot.
I hope so.
Now, I'm guessing that you enjoy quite a bit of latitude on how and you teach, not necessarily what you teach. That's somewhat in the syllabus. Mm-hmm. How important is it for you to have that freedom to sometimes wing it, sometimes, nail it down, in order for you to be the Gary Stark that we all love?
Well, the quick answer is very important. So important, I can't imagine not teaching that way. I couldn't tell you exactly why. That's I could. I could look at intrinsic motivation and all
definitely.
Sorts of concepts in organizational behavior, but extremely important. So important that I couldn't. I'd still teach it if they told me how to teach it, but
Just,
I can't imagine that. I
you'd
really
work
can't.
around, and this, because of this ACSB, for example, which came in like clamps on schools, and then created all kinds of so-called tangible measures and so forth. I can remember in my last few years, I retired in 2016, but we were just being visited for ACSB the first time. And I remember feeling like oxygen was being somehow removed, like in a Star Trek set, from the classroom. And the students probably wouldn't notice it. I sure did. And then they'd say, well, I taught by choice. I always taught intro to management as a full professor. I loved teaching intro to management because I figured every business student was going to be affected and effective depending on how much enthusiasm they develop for that very large set of theory that we offer. Anyway, I can remember someone coming along saying, you need to create a 20-question true-false test at the end of your course that shows your students learned management. They actually said that. Did I freeze? Did we freeze?
Yeah, you did. You did freeze.
We froze, but because you're still at 35 degrees below zero up there in the UP.
I am wearing jeans and a small.
Anyway, the gist of it was, they said, you got to create this questionnaire, and it's got to be proctored, 25 questions about management. And then I said, what will they do with it? Oh, well, they'll put it into the assurance of learning numbers. Oh, okay. So I did all kinds of things right up to my last class, all the crazy free. Let's think about the future. It's yours, and then I let them read it. They did the textbook and all the stuff, Rich, I was required to do. I worked all around, in between and up and above. And then they took the 25 questions. And then I remember my chairman, he said, Dave, gee, I don't like the way those came out. I said, well, then that must prove that I'm a lousy teacher. Let me just push my teaching award over here so we can talk without an interference. And I was being an asshole about it. I can say that it's my podcast. But here's something, Gary.
And you were tenured, so you can't be an asshole.
But you see, the subject which you pointed out was infinite in its wonderful complexity. Always having to do with all the choices humans make from moment to moment that leaves them high or dry or, underwater. All those choices, compounded by being business choices, require, as you said earlier, a very different set of mind. And in a way, we were doing, or you're still doing, for those learners, what your professor said on the first day of your doctorate program. We're going to disabuse you.
Yes, that's the exact word he used, disabuse.
Disabuse you of the idea that management is a matter of mechanics. Right. And as Taylor once said, all you have to do is throw them, like a little bird seed, and people will do what they're supposed to do.
I do something similar with, I tell a story about Frederick Taylor. I read his exact words, and basically he's talking about scientific management. And I could quote this almost exactly because I read it pretty much every semester, something to the effect of, now, one of the very first requirements of a man who will do this type of work is that he shall have the mental ability of an ox. The man who is more intelligent is entirely unsuited for this kind of work. So I asked the students, okay, think of the smartest ox you know. Think of the dumbest person you know. Who's smarter? So and asked, so what percentage of people are dumb as an ox? 0%. 0% of people are suited for
management.
For scientific management type work.
Wow, that's a hell of a quote. I wish I had I picked up that one. Let's talk a little bit about why we know each other, and that is this society called the Management and Organization Behavior Teaching Society. You've contributed a lot to it, and co-led with Mike Stratton when he was president. And we've done a lot, both of us, in one way or another, over the years, to bring people together in June on various campuses. And we just completed that, and I was quite encouraged by the fact that I hardly knew anyone at that of the 200. Why is that encouraging? Because I'm well past my sell date, and some of us who came there to honor the 50th were happy to see that there was a sort of a lovely sort of a blossoming of people who looked different, sound different, taught at different types of schools. And I know you and Mike worked together prior to Joe Seltz, also after Joe, to bring that kind of newness in.
Exactly.
How has it been valuable to you over the years to be active in this society?
Oh my gosh. Hard to quantify. I guess we can't quantify. It's been.
You can. You're an accountant.
I forgot.
The word count is in your name.
A long time ago. It's been incredible. It's, I've been so honored to be a part of it, period, and to be able to present there and to meet incredible people like you. It's just so many people I could name that I'm just honored to know and honored to be friends with, but that would actually seek my whatever wisdom I have. So, but there's so many wise people of all ages there, and I'm glad you recognize that. That there are newer people there, because maybe I've been on the board off and on for last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And my early time on the board, that's something we talked about a lot. Yeah. We love Dave Fearon. We love Joe Seltzer, but eventually, and they're eventually going to retire and may not come to the conference anymore. Thank goodness. You guys still come. We need younger people or people earlier in their careers, and we made a concerted effort to do that, and I'm really glad that's paying off. So I guess that's part of the importance. Part of it of the conference, I love it because it is relatively unstructured. You're free to talk about ideas that honestly you couldn't talk about with most of your colleagues. I don't know if that was your experience, but most of my colleagues at North.
No, it's true. No,
they just think
they're all very busy. They were all very busy, and I'd come back all charged up, and I'd say, I'd love to tell you about some things that happened. Geez, I love to, but I got to get to class, or because my enthusiasm was my enthusiasm, and I couldn't. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't contagious, but it is contagious when you're at those meetings.
Goodness.
I say after telling you that I had COVID when I get home, but this is a better kind of contagion, and I had my antenna up to see throughout that week at Jacksonville University if there was still that spark. And here's why it mattered to me, because the compression of the freedoms of a faculty person to be the kind of person you have become and I became is real on and particularly on the campuses that are in the accreditation vice, and some may not even have the chance to know that they can be experimental in their teaching. And what we're saying at those meetings, if the sessions are well chosen, is you have to be experimental. Everything you're doing is ask the question: if my students behave this way and read and use this material, will they be able to XXX? It's an open experiment. So I didn't pick up too much bitching and moaning, because this is a very a group that at least got support from their campuses to come. But what's your gut tell you about how the society can help reopen the oxygen tank of teaching creativity so people can breathe better?
Maybe it's a simple prescription, but for the most part, keep doing what we're doing. I think that the EAI, Early Educator Institute, and the Doctoral Institute, I know that the board has made a concerted effort to expand that and to make that a bigger deal. And that kind of keeps that lifeblood.
Yeah, it does.
And maybe those people can spread the word back on their own campuses. I guess that's part of the idea. It's not just getting them interested, but maybe they can spread the word, and slowly we can change that culture you're referring to, where we do feel kind of compressed into a certain box. And then we can break that.
I like that. I like that now, because in its origins, as Dave Bradford and Alan Cohen and John Miller and several people were at our fellows session, and then you saw the video that played throughout. What David Bradford and those guys, the founders, were saying that 50 years ago, they didn't have much elbow room, or there was enough room above them, and they're feeling somewhat boxed in at schools like Harvard, Stanford, Yale's, where John was coming from, and they were concerned that the subject matter was far too important in the world to be relegated to one small spot in an otherwise finance-driven business school. And that was 50 years ago. Not much has changed.
Right.
How is your management department doing, holding your own within your business school? I know you brought Steve Adelson in recently.
Yeah, that's been great. So we're a small enough college. It's a college of business that we don't have departments. So as far as a management department, we don't really have to. I guess we don't have to fight for space or
line.
There's sort of the attitude among some people that I think, or I can sort of detect from some of the faculty, certainly not a majority, that org behavior is not that important. They're business majors. Let's focus on finance. Let's focus on accounting. And that's, to me, is a pretty shallow view. I recognize it's important. I guess we're still in a capitalist economy, so I guess that's important to for that to survive in that economy. But ultimately, it's all that stuff is just a means to an end. Org behavior is where it's at. That stuff. That's what's even though it's not as quantifiable, it's the stuff that's real. That's the point of everything we do.
That's great.
So if you're chasing money, why are you chasing money? Well, let organizational behavior tell you.
Yeah, it's real. It's now, and there's no one in any conversation who can say, well, human behavior, that's another subject for another time, because even in a conversation, you are doing human behavior. The conversation is transforming at least a couple of people's thought about any subject under the sun, and which is what you and I have done in the last 33 minutes. We didn't know when we started this conversation, Gary, how this was going to go. I knew this. I knew it was going to be interesting and lively. And when I go through and edit out to find a soundbite to feature it, I'll know I'll have plenty of choices, including what you just said in the last moment about being real. But since you know I'm seeking a memorable soundbite,
Oh boy.
not to put pressure on you, but the question is, can you imagine yourself not teaching, and in particular, not teaching organization behavior until at least to get to be my age, which for you would be another 30 years? Can you imagine yourself doing something? Separate yourself altogether like you did when you walked away from that lucrative accounting job in Chicago years back and saying, I'm done with teaching, particularly organization behavior. I'm going to become an X for the rest of my life.
I can't see that happening.
Why not?
I mean, it's who I am. How's that for a soundbite? I mean, that's
perfect. Exactly.
I did teacher, in particular, or behavior teacher, to my soul. I think it fits my personality, the way I think. It's what I enjoy. Obviously, highly intrinsically motivated by it. So it's difficult to imagine. Now on the bad days, because there are some bad days. Like
sure.
Don't work in the class, or your dean's mad at you for something, or your committees are getting overwhelming. The only other career I could imagine would be like an urban planner. That would be really cool. Like, I just took a trip to Chicago where we lived 30 years ago. I just find cities and all that stuff fascinating, but that's all behavioral stuff.
It is.
How does laying out the buildings this way, or the streets this way, public transportation affect how people work together? I find all that stuff fascinating. So that's about the only thing I could imagine doing.
I love that answer because it's in your soul, but that's the truth of it. That's really what we're looking for in all the different practices that get revealed in these conversations. But the really coolest thing, I think, is the second part of the question: why OB? And the answer is, it's everywhere, all the time. You do not have to grapple for subject matter. Yes, you can pull in a poem, or you can pull in one of the great thinkers of the ancient times, and you can incorporate that. But in the meantime, I can't remember a day, and this is what I truly miss the most about classroom work. I can't remember a day when I wasn't going, I was maybe listening to a book on tape or observing something in traffic, and I'd say, I'm bringing this back to class.
Yep. Every day. I got material, and so I always left a little bit of elbow room in my modules because of these neat discoveries. And then, of course, the other side of that is, this is what I've noticed, students. What have you noticed? What's something like that struck you? And now we've got some really good interaction going there. So I'm sorry, you're asking me a question there? Or
no, I'm just pointing out that when you add, not only is our subject interesting, but if you can show students that they just may have noticed something as well, it becomes what Peter Vail called co-inquiry. In fact, that's the way he would. I took several classes with him and co-taught one when we were at the University of Connecticut, and that's as brilliant as he was, and he had an eidetic memory. He could tell you everything he ever read and on what page. Wow. He would suspend that, not being the sage on the stage, and he would come in and he'd start a class with, "Gee, did you notice the parking lot today? Anyone notice the parking lot today?" And some student would put up their hand and say, "Yeah, I could find a place to park near the business school." And he'd say, "Why do you think that was?" Like your 72 questions.
Yeah.
What's going on that we don't have a full parking lot at the time we always have one? And then they'd speculate, and then someone would say, well, maybe there's some kind of flu going around, or whatever. And then that would get us into it. And he'd say, okay, now with that in mind, take a look at what we just read, or, let's discuss the Abilene paradox, and on it went. And I can tell you, though, when I co-taught an MBA class with him, and we had a lot of Pratt Whitney engineers there. This is to round out our conversation, since you were an almost engineer. Yep. a lot of those guys really hated that because they came in from their day of back then slide rules and manuals. And here was this guy saying, "Hey, did you ever notice?" You're like a Jerry Seinfeld. and they're like, "What's going to be on the goddamn test?"
Exactly. Oh, man.
So anyway, Gary, this has been wonderful. Thank you for letting me catch up with you, and stay well and stay in this work.
Yeah.
This work is you. Yes,
it is. As it is for you, too.
Yeah, I'm still doing it. I don't even have a class. That's that's how much you have to do this. You just can't let it go.
I think we all want to be Dave Fearon when we grow up. Do something like that.
No, I was fine until you said grow up, because that's the part.
You never grow up.
No, God.
That's how I feel. I don't want to grow up.
I'm the Peter Pan of professoring, I think. Gary, thanks again.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a joy to be interviewed by you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Practice Podcast, where we discuss practice with a capital P. If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to inactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to inactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Oh, and one more thing. How could I forget? The book, On Practice as a Way of Being, is available now in digital form, something that would be new, like podcasting to many of us. And it's a great way of learning more and more about what this podcast presented when Peter Vale and I originated it several years ago. So please come to mylibrary.world/practice, and you'll see what I mean. Thank you.